Imagine sitting in your car for a minute before work. The engine is still running. The parking lot is slowly filling. And you open your banking app just to take a quick look. Everything seems fine. Your paycheck arrives regularly, bills get paid, and nothing feels out of control. Yet there's a quiet feeling that the numbers should look a little better than they do. You have a solid job, a decent salary, and you're careful with money. From the outside, your life looks responsible and stable. But the balance in your account always feels like it's hovering in the same place. Not terrible, not amazing, just okay. Now picture someone who works in the same building as you. Same department, similar salary, similar career path. You both started around the same time, sat through the same meetings, listened to the same corporate speeches about productivity and growth. Over the years, you both received raises. Life gradually improved. When the raises came, you upgraded a few things. A nicer apartment because it felt like the right time. A newer car because the old one had started showing its age. A few extra comforts in daily life. Nothing extravagant, just small improvements that made things a little easier. Your coworker made a different choice. Instead of upgrading her lifestyle when her salary increased, she kept living roughly the same way she had when she started. The same modest apartment, the same reliable car, the same simple habits. When her income went up, she quietly directed the extra money somewhere else. She invested it, not in anything flashy or complicated, just steady contributions into retirement accounts and broad investment funds. Month after month, year after year, she treated those raises as something that belonged to her future rather than her present. Fast forward many years. One morning, she receives a notification from her investment account showing how much her portfolio generated recently. The number surprises even her. The money her investments produced during that period is almost the same as what she earns from her actual job. Think about that for a moment. Two people start at the same place. They earn similar salaries and follow similar career paths. One continues relying almost entirely on a paycheck. The other gradually builds a system that begins paying her even when she isn't working. The difference wasn't luck. It wasn't secret knowledge or a perfect market prediction. It was time and consistency. There is a simple concept behind this idea that often changes how people think about money. It's sometimes described as the moment when your investments begin producing enough income to cover your basic living expenses. When that happens, your relationship with work changes completely. Work becomes optional instead of necessary. This doesn't mean most people suddenly quit their jobs. In fact, many people who reach that point continue working because they enjoy what they do or value the structure of their routine. The real difference is psychological. When your life no longer depends entirely on your next paycheck, your choices start to feel different. You negotiate differently. You think about opportunities differently. You worry less about unexpected changes. Money itself isn't the real goal. Control is. For many people, the biggest obstacle isn't income. It's the quiet habit of allowing every raise to slowly turn into a higher cost of living. This happens so gradually that most people never notice it. A slightly nicer apartment when the lease ends. A car upgrade when the old one still works, but doesn't feel exciting anymore. Dining out a little more often because you can finally afford it. Subscriptions that quietly accumulate month after month. Each decision feels reasonable on its own. None of them seem reckless. But together they create something powerful. A lifestyle that requires your entire paycheck to maintain. When that happens, even a good salary can feel strangely tight. The money arrives and disappears almost immediately because the structure of your life depends on it. Meanwhile, someone who made slightly different decisions is building something quietly in the background. Investing often feels slow at first, almost pointless. When you begin with small amounts, the results seem insignificant. The growth during the early years is modest and sometimes barely noticeable. It can feel like you're sacrificing present comfort for something that isn't producing visible results. But something interesting happens over time. As investments grow, the returns themselves begin generating additional returns. Money starts creating more money. At first, the change is subtle, then gradually it becomes more noticeable. Eventually, the growth coming from the investments themselves begins to rival the money being added from new contributions. This is the moment when the system starts working on its own. People often underestimate how powerful this shift can become because the early stages feel so slow. It's like planting a tree and staring at the soil for months. wondering if anything is happening underneath. But roots grow long before branches appear. Another important idea is the role of saving rate. Many people assume that financial progress depends mostly on earning a high salary. Income does matter, but it isn't always the deciding factor. What truly shapes long-term financial independence is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Someone who earns a moderate income, but consistently saves a meaningful portion of it can eventually build significant wealth. Meanwhile, someone earning a much higher salary may struggle to accumulate anything if their lifestyle expands to absorb every dollar. This is why people with very different incomes sometimes end up in surprisingly similar financial situations. One person builds a lifestyle that leaves space for the future. Another builds a lifestyle that consumes the present. Over time, those choices compound just like investments do. The world we live in makes this challenge even harder. Modern consumer culture is extremely effective at encouraging people to spend. Advertising constantly suggests that happiness, success, and comfort come from upgrading our lives. Every new product promises convenience or status. Every marketing campaign whispers the same idea: you deserve this. None of these messages are inherently bad. Enjoying life and improving your circumstances is a good thing. The challenge is learning to distinguish between upgrades that genuinely improve your life and those that quietly increase your financial pressure. Sometimes the difference between long-term freedom and long-term stress comes down to decisions that seem small at the moment they're made. Choosing whether a raise becomes a lifestyle upgrade or an investment contribution. Choosing whether a bonus becomes a vacation or a deposit into the future. Neither choice is morally superior. The question is simply what kind of life you want to build. One fascinating discovery from research on wealth is that many financially independent people didn't follow glamorous career paths. They weren't necessarily celebrities, entrepreneurs, or high-earning executives. Many worked in stable professions that rarely attract headlines. Engineers, accountants, teachers, healthcare workers. People who built wealth through patience rather than dramatic financial wins. They followed a few consistent habits. They started investing as early as possible. They saved a meaningful portion of their income. They avoided constantly upgrading their lifestyle. And most importantly, they allowed time to do the heavy lifting. Time is the one factor that cannot be replaced or accelerated. Starting earlier gives your investments more years to grow and compound. Waiting too long removes some of the most powerful years of growth from the equation. This is why financial educators often emphasize starting even with small amounts rather than waiting until everything feels perfect. Perfection rarely arrives. The earlier the process begins, the more opportunity. Compound growth has to transform modest contributions into significant results. There's another aspect of financial independence that people rarely talk about: reaching the point where money is no longer the primary concern. Doesn't automatically create a meaningful life. Many individuals who achieve financial freedom discover that the bigger question becomes what they want to do with their time. Work, even when it's stressful, provides structure, social connection, and a sense of purpose. When that structure disappears, people sometimes feel lost. The happiest financially independent individuals often share something in common. They aren't retiring from something. They're moving towards something. A project they've always wanted to start. A creative pursuit that was postponed for years. Volunteer work, teaching, building a small business, or spending more time with family. Financial independence simply gives them the freedom to choose those paths without worrying about survival. The real reward isn't unlimited leisure. It's autonomy. It's the ability to decide how your time and energy are spent. Even before reaching complete independence, small financial milestones can change the way life feels. Building an emergency fund, for example, can reduce the constant anxiety that comes from living paycheck to paycheck. Knowing that unexpected expenses won't immediately become a crisis provides an enormous sense of relief. As savings and investments grow, that feeling of stability grows as well. Suddenly, workplace decisions feel less intimidating. Negotiating salary, exploring new opportunities, or even leaving a toxic job becomes less frightening when your financial life has a safety cushion. Step by step, financial security transforms from a distant dream into a gradual shift in perspective. The journey toward independence doesn't require extreme sacrifice or perfect discipline. It simply requires understanding the long-term consequences of everyday decisions. Spending and saving are not just financial choices. They are time choices. Every dollar invested today represents time you may not have to work in the future. Every dollar spent represents time exchanged for something in the present. The balance between those two ideas defines the direction of your financial life. Some people prefer enjoying most of their income today and working longer. Others prefer saving aggressively so they can gain flexibility sooner. Both approaches can lead to fulfilling lives. What matters is making the choice consciously instead of drifting into it. Imagine again sitting in that car before work, checking your bank account. Now imagine checking an investment account many years later and seeing that the growth generated by your past decisions has become meaningful. Not because you discovered a secret or took extreme risks, but because you started early, stayed consistent, and allowed time to compound your efforts. The number on the screen represents thousands of small choices made quietly over many years. Choosing patience over impulse. Choosing consistency over perfection. Choosing the future without completely ignoring the present. That quiet system keeps working whether you are asleep, commuting, relaxing with friends, or pursuing the things that make life meaningful. And one day, without any dramatic announcement, you realize something subtle but powerful. Your life is no longer controlled entirely by your next paycheck. The freedom didn't arrive overnight. It grew slowly, almost invisibly, until the math finally caught up with the patience. And that is how ordinary decisions gradually turn into extraordinary independence. Picture the quiet routine of an ordinary weekday morning. The alarm goes off, you reach for your phone, and before even leaving bed, you glance at your bank balance. It's become a habit, not because something is wrong, but because you want reassurance that everything is still under control. Most people live inside that routine for years. They earn, they spend, they save a little when they can, and they assume this pattern will continue for the rest of their working lives. But hidden inside that routine is a powerful idea that many people never fully understand. Money can work, not in the metaphorical sense people often talk about, but literally. Money placed in the right places begins generating more money, slowly at first, then steadily, and eventually in ways that start to feel almost surprising. Yet most people never experience the full effect of this process because the system is interrupted before it has time to grow. Imagine two individuals beginning their careers at roughly the same time. Their starting salaries are similar. They face the same living expenses and the same decisions about housing, transportation, and everyday spending. One of them follows the path that feels natural. As income grows, life improves. A slightly better place to live, a newer car, more dinners out, small comforts that make the present feel rewarding. The other person makes a quiet decision that seems almost invisible at first. Instead of expanding her lifestyle each time her income increases, she allows only small changes, while directing the majority of the extra money into investments. Both people are living good lives. Neither is doing anything irresponsible. But over time, something subtle begins happening beneath the surface. The investments begin growing. At first, the progress feels slow. In the early stages, investment growth doesn't look dramatic. The numbers increase a little, then a little more. Sometimes the market rises, sometimes it falls. The journey looks uneven and sometimes discouraging. Many people stop during this phase because the results don't feel exciting enough to justify the effort. But the real magic of investing rarely appears at the beginning. It appears later, when time has had the chance to multiply those early decisions. Every year that passes allows the growth from previous years to produce additional growth. Money begins generating returns, and those returns begin generating their own returns. Eventually, the process becomes powerful enough that the growth itself becomes meaningful. At that stage, the investor is no longer the only contributor to the account. The portfolio itself begins participating. This shift changes the entire experience of building wealth. Early on, every dollar in the account represents money you worked for. Later, a growing portion of the account represents money created by time, patience, and compound growth. And eventually something interesting happens. The growth generated by the portfolio starts becoming noticeable enough to affect your daily life. You open your investment account and realize the increase over a period of time equals something meaningful, not just a few dollars or a small percentage, but an amount that could cover real expenses. This realization can feel almost surreal. The system you built quietly in the background has begun functioning on its own. Many people call this moment a turning point, not because it instantly changes your life, but because it changes how you think about work, income, and time. For most of our lives, we exchange hours for money. Our ability to earn is directly connected to our presence and effort. But investments operate differently. Once money is invested, it continues working whether you are actively thinking about it or not. It grows while you are commuting, sleeping, spending time with family, or pursuing hobbies. And the longer it remains invested, the more powerful that process becomes. However, reaching that stage requires something that feels uncomfortable in the beginning: patience. The early years of investing demand consistency without immediate gratification. You contribute regularly, watch the balance fluctuate, and trust a process that doesn't always provide quick rewards. This is where many people lose momentum. Modern life encourages instant results. We're used to quick deliveries, fast entertainment, and immediate feedback. Waiting years for something meaningful to grow can feel frustrating. But financial growth follows a different rhythm. It rewards people who are willing to think in decades rather than days. Another challenge is the constant pressure to upgrade our lifestyles. As income increases, the world offers countless ways to spend that extra money. Advertising, social media, and cultural expectations all suggest that success should be visible. A nicer home, a newer vehicle, trendy experiences, luxury products. None of these things are inherently wrong. Enjoying the fruits of your work is an important part of life. The difficulty appears when every increase in income immediately becomes a permanent increase in spending. When that happens, your financial baseline rises along with your salary. Instead of gaining freedom, you gain new obligations. A larger apartment means higher rent. A newer car means monthly payments. More subscriptions, more services, more habits that require continuous income. Soon the lifestyle itself requires your entire paycheck just to remain stable. This is how many people with strong incomes still feel financially constrained. Not because they lack opportunity, but because their expenses expanded alongside their earnings. The alternative approach is surprisingly simple, though not always easy. Instead of allowing every raise to transform your lifestyle, you allow part of it to build your future. When income increases, some of the extra money improves your life today, and some quietly strengthens your financial foundation. Over time, those choices accumulate. A person who consistently directs a portion of their income toward investments creates a growing system that gradually reduces dependence on their job. The process doesn't require perfection. Markets will rise and fall. Some years will be exciting, others will feel stagnant. What matters most is remaining consistent through those fluctuations. History shows that long-term investors who stay patient tend to benefit from the overall growth of the economy. Businesses expand, innovation continues, and productivity improves. Investments connected to that growth participate in the progress. The key is allowing time to do its work. Interestingly, many people who eventually achieve financial independence discover that money was never the most important part of the journey. What truly matters is the sense of control it provides. When your finances become stable enough that you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck, the entire emotional relationship with work begins to change. Decisions feel less pressured. You can walk into conversations with employers feeling calmer because your survival doesn't depend on a single paycheck. You can consider new opportunities, start projects, or take calculated risks that once felt impossible. Financial independence is often misunderstood as a life of endless leisure. In reality, most people who reach that level continue working in some form. They simply choose work differently. Some pursue creative interests they once postponed. Others start small businesses, volunteer, teach, or focus on personal passions. The difference is that their time is guided by choice rather than necessity. Even partial financial progress creates benefits. Building savings for emergencies reduces stress dramatically. Instead of fearing unexpected expenses, you gain confidence that problems can be handled. As investments grow further, the sense of security expands. Your life begins shifting from survival mode toward possibility. And all of this begins with small, consistent steps. Regular investing, thoughtful spending, allowing time to compound your efforts. When you look at someone who has achieved financial independence, It may appear as if they reached that point through extraordinary talent or luck. In reality, many simply followed a disciplined process for a long period of time. They didn't rely on dramatic financial wins. They relied on patience. They started when they could. They continued through uncertain markets. They avoided constantly interrupting their investments. And eventually, after years of quiet progress, the system they built began producing results that felt remarkable. Imagine looking at your investment account many years from now and realizing something surprising. The growth you see isn't only the result of the money you contributed. A large portion came from the time your investments spent growing on their own. Those years of consistency created momentum. The money you invested earlier worked silently in the background while you lived your life. That's the true power of long-term investing. Not sudden riches, but gradual independence. A shift from needing every paycheck to having options. From worrying about every expense to knowing you have stability. From working only because you must to working because you choose to. And that transformation doesn't happen through one dramatic decision. It happens through thousands of small ones. Every time you choose patience over impulse. Every time you invest instead of spending. Every time you allow time to strengthen the foundation you're building. Years later, the results of those quiet choices begin speaking for themselves. And one day you realize that the future you once hoped for has slowly become your reality as years pass. Something else begins to change besides the numbers in an account. The way you think about money slowly shifts. At the beginning of the journey, every expense feels personal because every dollar came directly from your effort. When you spend money, you're spending hours of your life that were traded for that income. But later, when investments begin growing, the relationship becomes different. You begin to see money not only as something you earn, but also as something that can exist and grow independently of you. This change in perspective can be surprisingly powerful. Many people go through their entire lives believing that the only way to increase their financial security is by working harder, negotiating higher salaries, or constantly chasing the next promotion. Those things certainly help, but they are still limited by one factor: time. There are only so many hours in a day. Your energy, focus, and health place limits on how much you can earn through work alone. Investments operate outside those limits. When money is invested in productive businesses, it becomes connected to the work of thousands of people across entire industries. Companies build products, hire employees, develop technology, and expand their services. As they grow, the value of those businesses can grow as well. Investors participate in that growth simply by owning small pieces of those companies. This is one of the most overlooked ideas in personal finance. When you invest, you are no longer only a worker in the economy. You become a partial owner of it. That shift changes the entire trajectory of wealth building. Workers trade time for income. Owners benefit from the productivity of systems that operate continuously. Over long periods of time, ownership can become incredibly powerful. But the path toward that ownership is rarely dramatic. It's built through small, steady actions repeated over many years. One contribution at a time. One month at a time. One decision after another to prioritize the future alongside the present. Many people underestimate how long meaningful financial change takes. In the beginning, progress feels almost invisible. The account grows slowly. And sometimes market downturns make it feel like you're moving backward. Those moments can test your patience. But every experienced investor eventually learns the same lesson. Volatility is normal. Markets rise and fall. Economies expand and contract. And uncertainty appears regularly. What matters is the long-term direction. Over decades, productive economies tend to grow. Businesses adapt, innovation continues, and new opportunities emerge. Investors who remain patient through the temporary storms often benefit from that overall growth. Think about how many technological changes have transformed the world over the past few decades. Entire industries have appeared that barely existed before. Communication, transportation, healthcare, entertainment, and finance have all evolved dramatically. Behind every one of those changes were companies creating new value, and investors who owned pieces of those companies participated in the progress. Another important truth about financial independence is that it rarely arrives as a sudden, dramatic moment. Instead, it creeps up quietly. At first, you notice that your savings account has grown large enough to handle Unexpected expenses. The constant anxiety about emergencies fades. Then you notice that your investment portfolio has reached a size where its movements actually matter. Market changes can add or subtract meaningful amounts. Later, you realize that the growth of your investments over a year equals what you once struggled to save through work alone. Eventually, the income generated by those investments begins covering real parts of your life. Maybe it covers your groceries. Later, it might cover your rent or mortgage. Over time, it can grow large enough to support a significant portion of your lifestyle. Each stage brings a new level of flexibility. And flexibility is the real currency of financial independence. It allows you to make decisions based on what you value instead of what you fear. Many people who achieve strong financial security choose to continue working because they enjoy contributing, learning, and staying engaged with the world. Work can be fulfilling when it's done on your own terms. The difference is that they no longer feel trapped by necessity. They can say no when something doesn't align with their values. They can take breaks between projects. They can explore new interests without worrying about immediate income. That freedom changes how life feels day to day. Ironically, people often become more creative and productive after reaching this level of stability because the pressure to survive is removed. Instead of chasing money, they pursue ideas, goals, and experiences that genuinely matter to them. Another overlooked aspect of wealth building is simplicity. Many people assume successful investing requires constant monitoring, complicated strategies, or predicting market movements. In reality, some of the most effective long-term approaches are surprisingly simple. Consistent contributions, broad diversification, patience, avoiding the temptation to react emotionally to short-term market swings. The investors who succeed over decades are often those who resist the urge to constantly adjust their strategy. They create a system and allow it to operate quietly in the background of their lives. This approach frees mental energy for other pursuits. Instead of obsessing over daily market movements, they focus on building careers, relationships, and meaningful experiences. Their investments grow steadily while they live their lives. One day they look back and realize that the system they built years ago has grown far beyond what they initially expected. The key insight behind all of this is surprisingly simple. Financial independence isn't about extreme wealth or luxury lifestyles. It's about reducing the gap between what you need and what your investments can provide. When that gap closes, even partially, life becomes more flexible. Your decisions begin to reflect your priorities rather than your financial constraints. And perhaps the most encouraging part of this journey is that it doesn't require extraordinary circumstances. Many people who achieve financial independence started with ordinary jobs and ordinary incomes. What made the difference was not how much they earned in a single year, but how consistently they invested over many years. They understood that wealth is rarely built through a single breakthrough. It grows through persistence. Each month, they set aside a portion of their income. Sometimes the amount felt small. Sometimes the progress seemed slow. But they continued. Years passed. Markets rose and fell. Life changed in many ways. But the habit remained. Over time, the accumulation of those small actions became something powerful. The portfolio grew. The income it generated grew. And eventually the system they built began providing the freedom they once imagined. Imagine reaching a point where checking your financial accounts no longer creates stress or uncertainty. Instead of wondering whether the numbers are enough, you recognize the steady growth created by years of patience. You realize that your past decisions have been quietly working on your behalf the entire time. The effort you made years ago is still producing results today, and it will likely continue producing results for many years to come. That is the quiet promise of long-term investing. Not instant wealth, not dramatic overnight success, but something far more reliable. A gradual shift from dependence to independence. A life where money becomes a tool instead of a constant worry. And it all begins with a single decision repeated consistently over time. Choosing to invest in your future while you build your present, and somewhere along that journey, something subtle but powerful begins to happen inside your mind. You stop seeing money only as something that flows in and out of your life. Instead, you begin seeing it as a tool that can build stability, opportunity, and time. Time is the real prize. For most of our lives, we trade time for income. We wake up, go to work, complete tasks, and receive a paycheck in return. There's nothing wrong with that system. It's how the world functions. But when investments begin to grow, another relationship with time appears. Instead of exchanging every hour for money, some of the money you already earned begins working in the background, quietly, patiently, without asking anything from you. And that idea alone can change how you approach your entire career. Imagine walking into work knowing that your life does not depend completely on that paycheck. You still value your job, but the fear that once followed every financial decision begins to fade. You start noticing that your confidence changes. Conversations with managers feel different because you know you have options. Career choices become more thoughtful instead of desperate. You begin thinking about what kind of work you actually want to do, not just what pays the bills. That shift is incredibly important because financial independence is not really about escaping work. It's about removing the pressure that forces you to stay in situations that drain your energy or limit your growth. When people first hear about the idea of financial freedom, they often imagine a life of endless vacations and relaxation. But the reality for most people is far more interesting. When individuals reach a point where money is no longer their biggest concern, they don't usually stop doing things. They start doing different things. Some people pursue creative interests they ignored for years: writing, painting, building something meaningful with their hands. Others begin helping their communities through volunteering or mentoring. Some start businesses they were once too afraid to try. Others simply redesign their lives in quieter ways, working fewer hours, spending more time with family, traveling slowly instead of rushing through life. The real transformation isn't about escaping responsibility. It's about gaining control over how you spend your time. And that control is something most people crave without even realizing it. Many people believe that achieving financial security requires extreme sacrifices. They imagine a life of constant restriction, never enjoying the present moment. But the truth is more balanced than that. Building wealth is not about eliminating enjoyment from your life. It's about being intentional. It's about understanding that every financial decision carries a long-term effect. Some decisions strengthen your future, while others only satisfy the present. The goal is not to remove joy from today. The goal is to prevent today's spending from quietly stealing tomorrow's freedom. A simple shift in thinking can make this easier. Instead of asking yourself whether you can afford something, you start asking a different question. Does this purchase bring enough value to justify the time it represents? Because every dollar spent represents hours of work, and every dollar invested represents hours you might not need to work in the future. That perspective changes the meaning of everyday choices. Some purchases will still be absolutely worth it. Experiences, meaningful travel, time with people you love. Those moments enrich life in ways that money alone never could. But other purchases may start to feel less important once you realize what they cost in terms of future freedom. Over time, this awareness builds a new habit. You begin designing a life where spending and saving exist in balance. You enjoy the present while still protecting the future. And slowly, almost without noticing, your financial position strengthens. Savings accounts grow. Investments expand. Opportunities increase. The stress that once followed unexpected expenses begins to disappear. Instead of reacting to every financial surprise with panic, you respond with calm problem solving. Because you know you have a cushion, that feeling alone can dramatically improve the quality of everyday life. But the most fascinating part of this entire journey is how ordinary it can be. Many people who achieve strong financial independence never feel like they did anything extraordinary. They simply followed a few consistent habits. They avoided constantly increasing their lifestyle every time their income grew. They invested regularly, even when the amounts felt small. They stayed patient when markets became unpredictable. They trusted time to multiply their efforts. Years passed. Careers evolved. Families grew. Life presented challenges and celebrations. But through all of it, the habit remained. And eventually, those steady contributions built something powerful. Imagine looking back many years from now and realizing that the system you created quietly transformed your life, not through sudden wealth or dramatic success, but through consistency. Every month you invested was like planting another seed. Most of those seeds took time to grow. Some struggled during difficult seasons, but over the years they formed something stronger, a forest of financial stability. At first you barely noticed the growth. Then one day you realize the shade it created, the protection it provided, the freedom it allowed. Suddenly, the idea of relying on a paycheck forever no longer feels inevitable. You begin to see other possibilities. Maybe you continue working exactly where you are, but with less stress. Maybe you change careers and pursue something more meaningful. Maybe you take a break and explore parts of life that once felt impossible. Whatever path you choose, the difference is that the choice belongs to you. And that is what financial independence truly represents. It is not a finish line where life suddenly becomes perfect. It is the moment when your past discipline begins supporting your future freedom. A quiet turning point, where money stops controlling your decisions and starts supporting them. Most people assume that this kind of freedom belongs only to the extremely wealthy. But history repeatedly shows something different. It often belongs to people who made steady, thoughtful decisions long before anyone noticed. People who treated their future with the same care they gave their present. People who understood that the most powerful financial strategy is not speed or brilliance. It is patience, because compound growth rewards those who simply stay in the game long enough for the math to unfold. And when that math finally reveals itself, the results can feel almost unbelievable, not because they happened overnight, but because they grew quietly, year after year, while you were busy living your life. One day you look at the numbers and realize something remarkable. The effort you made long ago is still working for you. The money you once invested is still growing. And the freedom you once imagined is no longer a distant idea. It's something you built.